Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for this very important Lunch and Learn. So since it's lunchtime, please feel free to eat and also turn off your camera if you feel like that is what you want to do. And we'll leave time for questions at the end of the presentation. So unfortunately, this feels like an issue that's important across all our communities, across the state and the nation. So I'm so grateful that our speakers have joined us here today to share more about Be Smart and sharing tools to help families and communities secure guns more safely. So Maggie Zwettler is the state lead for Be Smart, and Fabricia Prado is a Be Smart trainer, as well as a member of our executive board. So we're very excited to have her here. So I will just turn over the floor to them.
Thank you, Audrey, and thank you everyone for attending our Be Smart program today. Before we begin, we'd like to prepare you for what to expect in this presentation. We will go through a PowerPoint presentation that will last about 25 to 30 minutes. At the end, we will dedicate some time to answer your questions and explain future steps. Please know that you hear today some content about violence, death, suicide, shootings, and things that may be triggering to you. This is a sensitive topic, and unfortunately, some of us have had directly or indirectly experienced gun violence and the consequences of unsafe or irresponsible gun behavior. So we ask you to please take care of yourself. If you feel anxious or disconnected, feel free to mute the conversation for a moment, take some time. You can practice some self-regulation skills, drink some water, grab some objects that help you to relax, grounding techniques. And when you feel ready, you can come back to the presentation. We have a link in the chat for the i2 app, and you have some skills that you can practice. There is Help Now, and some other skills that you can practice if you need. So let's begin. Be Smart is a program developed by Everytown for Gun Safety Support Fund to bring together parents and all adults concerned about kids, guns, and safety. Next, please.
Okay.
We want to thank Resilient Georgia for having us today. Before we get started today, I will tell a little bit about myself, then I will pass the word to Maggie Zwettler, the Georgia Be Smart lead. I am a licensed clinical social worker in Georgia, and my reasons to join, be involved in keeping kids safe from firearm injury are many, but I will summarize them in the fact that I am a mom, and possibly as many of you, there is not a single day that I don't think or I don't have the thought of a school shooting, and that's a terrible thing to have to worry about. I also have worked with adolescents and families, domestic violence, and situations that made me, as a therapist, put me in a position that I had to do threat assessments, maybe report threats of violence, and worry about the possibility of a gun being present and how this could potentially make any outcome more tragic. And the other reason is that it feels good to work with something that there's so much to do about. It's so preventable. So when you dedicate our time and our resources to something that, okay, this is a problem, and Be Smart is just the program that says, oh, okay, here's the solution. So it's very practical, and it seems a really good investment of time, energy, and resources to be dedicating to this type of cause that protects children. So now I'd like to introduce you to Meg Zwettler, the Georgia Be Smart lead, and she'll share a little bit of her experience with you all.
Okay. Thank you, Fabricia, and thank you all members of Resilient Georgia for having us here today. We appreciate this opportunity. So my name is Maggie Zwettler, and as the Be Smart lead, I kind of coordinate what's happening in our local groups throughout the state. And I became involved in the gun violence prevention movement after Parkland. I was a recently retired teacher. I retired from Cobb County, and I was literally sitting on my couch watching the news reports scroll across the screen and seeing these kids who had to stand up and speak for themselves because the adults in their lives had essentially let them down. So I decided I needed to get up off the couch and do something. And I have 3 children of my own and 6 grandchildren, going from elementary to high school age. So again, that's another 6 reasons. And I know many of you are parents and feel the same way as well. So a little bit more about Be Smart. The goal is to help parents and adults normalize the conversations around firearm safety, take the stigma away from talking about guns, and also encourage responsible action to keep kids safe and prevent gun deaths and injury. So to do this, we reach out to the community in a variety of ways that we'll talk about more as we go on. And another important thing about our campaign is that it is a 501c3. So when we're doing our Be Smart work, we keep it not only nonpartisan, but also non-political. And we feel that this enables us to have a conversation with people from different walks of life. Okay, and I am hitting enter and it's not going to the next slide. Oh my goodness. Excuse me, I'm so sorry about this. I'm hitting escape and nothing is happening now. Oh my goodness.
I unfortunately am also not very, okay, there.
Okay, it went to the slide, okay. All right, so sorry. We'll get through this. So I'd like to begin by establishing some common ground. And I'm going to make this smaller so I can see what I'm reading here. Okay, we all want kids to grow up happy and healthy. And as adults, we each have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our families, our homes, and our communities, including whether or not to have a gun in our home. If we can prevent even one child death or injury, it's our responsibility to do this. And I know this is an emotional issue, and we may come from different walks of life. Many of you are parents, some of you may be gun owners, and some of you have maybe even been impacted by gun violence in your lives. We believe that most gun owners want to be responsible gun owners, so we're here today to talk about what all of us can do, gun owners, non-gun owners alike, what we can do to ensure that our children and teens do not have unsupervised access to guns.
Be
The
Smart
Be
is a
Smart program is a program to bring together all adults concerned about kids, guns, and safety. So firearms are the leading cause of death for children in the United States and Georgia. An average of 1,000 children per year die by gun homicide in our country. Additionally, nearly 700 children die by firearm suicide each year, and 100 are unintentionally shot and killed. And it's a heartbreaking fact that not only in our country, but in our state of Georgia, firearms are the leading cause of death for children. This is not true for every state, but unfortunately, Georgia is one of the states on the list where most of the child deaths in our state are attributed to guns. So this has become a public health crisis. And as with many other things, gun violence disproportionately impacts Black children. Black children are 3 times more likely than white children to be killed with guns, and also 7 times more likely than white children to be shot and injured. This graph is from 2020 CDC data, and the data we get is always, you know, a year or two behind. We should be getting more updated data soon, but for now, this is showing from 2020. And for Georgia in particular, and you can see the number of firearm deaths was 209. On the next slide here, this is also CDC data, but it is the 5-year average. So it represents 2015 to 2020. So for those 5 years, we had 121 children, sadly, die by gun. And if you remember, we just said the number for 2020 was 209. So as you can see, the problem is not getting any better. And I'm going to let Fabricia take over.
A concern for all of us is the increasing amount of gunfire on school grounds, as we just saw very recently, unfortunately. Some parents, you know, even think, oh, maybe I'm safer in a private school, maybe a public school. And we are more and more having the feeling that we're not safe anywhere. And this is the real parent nightmare. So we had recently the Michigan State University, also the 6-year-old shooting the teacher in school grounds, getting the gun from the mom. So we have several examples of how the incidence of gunfire on school grounds, many times, like up to 76% of the time, the shooters under the age of 18 obtain the gun or the guns they used from their home or the home of relatives or friends. Think of Sandy Hook, Mom's Arsenal, Santa Fe in Texas, Dad's guns, and so on. So we have several examples of how this is the norm. Next, please. So on this slide, we share the fallout of when young people get their hands on unsecured guns. No story is quite the same, but all tragic and all preventable. So on January 12 this year, and this is all the ones that we collected for this year, in Louisville, Georgia, a 17-year-old boy unintentionally shot and killed a 13-year-old sister in their grandparents' home while making a video. So he faces multiple charges, including second-degree cruelty to a child. And in January this year as well, a 3-year-old shot and wounded himself in a hotel. The parents are also facing multiple charges.
And if we look on the other side of your screen, just last month on February 14th, this occurred in Decatur. A student at Miller Grove Middle School fired a gun inside a classroom during a bathroom break. Security guards quickly confiscated and secured the gun, so thankfully no one was injured, at least not physically. But we all know there was emotional trauma that occurred. And the student faces district consequences and possible criminal charges. So this is a middle school student, probably 12, 13 years old, and his life has changed now because of the ability that he had to access an unsecured gun. Our last story is talking about a suicide. We get our information from press releases, and because of consideration for the families, most suicide victims' stories are not published. But we have a website that every town supports called momentsthatsurvive.org. And if you go on there, you can read stories published by loved ones, by people whose loved ones have been taken by guns. So this story is about a Georgia woman. Her name is Deborah Cole, and she's now grown. She's in her 40s, but her life was changed when she was 5 years old. Her older brother, who was 14 at the time, had been living with a traumatic brain injury and he was severely depressed. He didn't get the help he needed, so he decided to use his dad's gun and end his life. And I spoke with Deborah to get her permission to include it when we updated our presentation. And she told me that this did not just affect her. The image of being a 5-year-old girl walking in and seeing her brother lay in a pool of blood is something that stays with her every day. But it also affected the whole family. Her parents divorced, her father disappeared, had very little contact with her, and her mother was very unemotionally available for her. She was grieving and wasn't able to really be the type of mother that she probably wanted to be. So Deborah now is a single parent. She has teenage children and she worries about them every day and knows all too well what can happen. So those are tragic stories, but we are here today to talk about what we can do. So the good news is there are actions that we can all take, and these actions are spelled out in our acronym. So S stands for secure all guns in your home and vehicle. M, model responsible behavior. A, ask about unsecured guns in other homes. R, recognize the role of guns in suicide. And T, tell your peers to be smart. So let's start with S, secure guns in homes and vehicles. It's estimated that 13 million households with children contain at least one gun in our country. And one study found that the majority of children in gun-owning households know exactly where the guns are stored, whether the parents realize this or not. So the recommendation is store guns locked up and inaccessible to kids. Hiding a gun is not securing a gun. And in 2020, there was a 31% increase in unintentional shooting deaths by children of themselves or others compared to the same time period in 2019. So we all know what happened in 2020, and we believe that the increase in gun sales and the fact that children were left alone many times during the pandemic led to this increase in unintentional shootings. So the importance of locking up guns is more important than ever, and it will help to reduce the risk of firearm suicide, unintentional firearm injury, as well as prevent firearm theft. And on the next two slides, we just have some examples of what secure storage is. We say the gold standard, of course, is to store your weapons and your ammunition separately in locked containers. What we find, though, when we talk to people, especially in our communities here in Georgia, is that many gun owners feel they need quick access to their firearm, at least one firearm. So the good news is that nowadays you can purchase a very good quality biometric gun safe that people can store in their bedside if they wish, or a closet, and only the owner can open that safe. Only the owner can have access to it. So we bring those safes with us when we do presentations in person, and also when we do tabling events and let people see how easy these are to use. We also have some cable locks, which is the least effective, but it's better than anything. And thanks to the Veterans Administration, they have given us free gun locks that we distribute also to the public. So that is, like I said, better than nothing. But we're very encouraged because the sales of biometric safes have really increased the last few years. Okay.
Okay.
And I believe, okay, I'm doing this one too, excuse me. Okay. No, I'm not. Fabricia, she's going to
Yes.
take over. So sorry.
Okay, no problem. So M is for model responsible behavior. So let's be clear, it's always an adult's responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to guns, not a curious child's responsibility to avoid guns. You cannot blame the kids and say they're too curious or impulsive, because they are, and we already know that. So make it a part of the normal safety conversation if you have with your children, that normalize the conversation, talk about it. They think about it. They maybe talk about it if they're peers. So keep the language simple and age appropriate. For example, you can say just simply, if you see a gun, don't touch it. Tell an adult right away. Kids know where their parents store their guns, and more than 1/3 reported handling their parents' guns, many doing so without the knowledge of their parents. You may have examples in your neighborhood and other places when, you might be surprised if you really ask and you want to know, you might be surprised about, what children may be doing, in the back of their parents. So talk to your kids about safety, but remember that's a precaution, that's not a guarantee. One study found that young children who go through a week-long gun safety training are just as likely as children with no training to approach or play with a handgun when they find one. Definitely, we cannot trust. You don't want to trust that. You want to be on the safe side. So modeling responsible behavior means that smart adults make sure that kids don't have the opportunity to access guns. In a simple analogy, think about medication, right? Medication, it could also be lethal. Imagine why medication comes with those leads that are so hard to open. Kids don't have access. We store them, away. So we are not teaching the children, hey, these are medications. You should not try to open it. You should not be curious about it. You are just having measures to make sure that it's not at reach, period, right? You're not going to have all kinds of medication, legal or illegal drugs all around the house in the nightstand. You open a drawer, a bunch of cocaine in a tiny little bag, and they, the same preoccupation about access, from kids to things that could be lethal, and that we cannot rely on their understanding that they should not touch it, they should not do anything about it. We cannot just assume that. We just need to have the adults securing guns so they're just not at reach, period. So next, we are going to talk about some tips in how do we talk to my children about it, right? And also, how do I talk to my friends about it? How do I ask when I send my kids over to somebody else's house? How do I ask? It's an uncomfortable conversation with children and with adults, and yet a necessary one. So some tips are: make the conversation about guns safety very casual, like part of day-to-day conversation. Don't say we have a meeting and now you have to talk about it. Like on a day-to-day, hey, do you talk about guns with your friends? Like, what do you know any friends who have carried guns? Like, do you know anybody, or what do you think about it? What is your opinion about it? If they are very young children, of course, you're not going to ask them about it, but you're going to just tell them what to do, right? If you see a gun, don't touch it. Tell an adult and leave the situation. Even if it looks like a toy, like, you have to just be clear, with young children, that even if it looks like a toy, don't touch it, don't, get away from this. And tell an adult. And repeat this conversation regularly. With older adults, then you can, with middle school children, you can have pictures, you can discuss what, guns can do, that not like in cartoons and, fantasy world that people die and then come back alive. like really reinforcing how dangerous, and this is not a toy, and this is not something that you play with. So teach information about guns and gun safety, make sure they understand how dangerous it is to have unsecured guns around, and tell them to leave the situation if that's the case. You may have some code words or sentences that they text you, or they tell you, or they tell their friend, like, my mom needs me home right now, like come up with any excuse to just leave the situation and tell an adult immediately. Tell them that if they see or hear something where a peer could get hurt, that they tell an adult, that they tell you, that tell the teacher right away. If they're older teams, like high school, teams, you can start conversations like, do you talk to your friends about it? Do you have you heard anything about it? What is your opinion? They also do drills at schools. And the other day I was talking to my son, and he was talking about it, and he was like, I don't think it's safe. I don't think the plan we have is safe, and there's some flaws. And he was coming up with ideas of what he would do differently. I'm like, oh man, okay, I'm getting worried now, because he wants maybe to be the hero, or he wants to outsmart, the shooter, and think of other alternatives. I'm like, okay, but basically they have a feeling, they react to that, they feel in a certain way. So we need to talk to them and help them reinstate the need for safety, and kind of balance out that need to be a hero or to protect themselves. And it's also very hard for older children to feel so powerless. And that's what I sensed from my own child, like feeling like, am I just supposed to duck and hide and do nothing, like, and be so powerless and just wait to see if I'm lucky or unlucky, my friends are lucky or unlucky? It puts them in a situation of powerlessness. So we definitely want to open space for them to share that with us, to talk, with us. And if they tend to be, even middle school children, if they tend to be more on the anxious side, you want to use statistics, you want to kind of reinforce to them how rare this would be, probability of this happening, how low it is, kind of try to help them to calm down and be safer. So you have to assess who is the kid that you're talking with. They want to be a hero, they are scared, they are intimidated, they want to, come up with other things, and then you can talk to them about it. But you have to normalize these conversations. Another thing that I like to think of is, if they go to somebody's house and a friend says, let's do this, invite them, my dad has a gun, let's take a look, whatever, that they say something like, oh, that's boring, let's do something else. Or maybe later, let's do something outside. They are very casual about it, but then they, do something else and run away immediately, tell their parents, the parents tell the other parents, like, and kind of solve the problem. If the team is babysitting, have them ask if they have a gun safely secured away from children's reach. It's another exposure if teenagers are babysitting. Next, so ask, and that's the difficult part for some adults, ask about unsecured guns in other homes. Make it part of your general safety conversation when you send your children to anybody's home. If you prefer, you can try emailing the parent or texting if it's easier for you. But the reality is that 4.6 million American children live in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun, and that's very scary. So that's why you need to ask about firearms in other homes. For the parents and caretakers in the home, what are some things that you ask normally before allowing your child to go to a play date or a sleepover? Think about it. You ask about food allergies, you ask about pool, right? If they have a pool, and safety. So hopefully you have learned today that asking about guns in the home should be as natural as asking about any other safety issues, dogs, who you be supervising the kids while they play. You can also tell the parents that my pediatrician told me to ask, or you can just, ask I like more and more pediatricians are adding that to their intake. And I read an article another day saying how I like how this doctor was framing it. And instead of saying, do you have guns? you just say, if you have guns, like you're already like cool about it. Okay, if you have guns, are they locked and safely stored away from children? They cannot reach it, like not on the closet, like if they are locked safely away from children. So I like, this is a little change, but I like how it sounds like if you have guns, okay, we're cool if you have, if they are stored, right? So next, please. Let's talk about recognizing the role of guns in suicide. They are. Access to a gun can mean the difference between life and death. As our children get older, you may need to consider taking another look at your storage methods. Maybe one lock, one simple way, won't do it anymore. They will be smart and try to, break it. And so you have to consider something better, right? You want to think about a gun safe, you want to think about the biometrics, you want to think about something more complex. We all know how children can be curious, impulsive, and I say that, but don't tell them. Sometimes I think, okay, honestly, brain-wise, to adolescents, children, they are half-brain people. Like they don't have yet the prefrontal cortex fully developed. It goes until the age of 24. That means they problem solving, executive functioning, impulsivity. It's, they don't even have the brain condition to make decisions like we do. So it's not fair to allow them to make them responsible for those decisions. So 70% of people who survive a suicide attempt, you never attempt suicide again, 70%. It's also important for parents to know that teens can be that impulsive, and in a bad day, or event, it can lead to that impulse about suicide attempt. Several adolescents have, had a suicide attempt. As long as a gun is not part of it, they most likely you survive. They might even have a second attempt, but then you leave and they change their mind many times. Many people change their mind. Many people are ambivalent about thinking about it. Even if they're impulsive, they may have a moment of ambivalence and they may want it, but they don't want it. But if they have a gun and access to it, that will make it so easy. So if you believe any family member is in distress, you might want to consider temporarily removing guns from your home. If you choose to store your guns in the home of a friend or family member, you should unload and lock the guns and not provide the key or code.
Okay. And a survey conducted by the CDC found that 20% of high school students had seriously considered attempting suicide within the last year. And as mental health professionals, I'm sure you are all very well aware of this fact. And on top of the consideration of suicide in teens, we also know that a study has showed that 41% of adolescents in gun-owning households report having easy access to the guns in their homes. So, as we discussed earlier, research shows that secure firearm storage is associated with a decreased risk of child firearm suicide. And when we say child, we're including teenagers in that as well. So here are some important resources, and I typically ask participants to take their phones out and take a screenshot, take a picture rather of this slide. But I'm sure as mental health professionals, you are all very well aware of these numbers. And what I like to emphasize too is that we now have the ability through 988 to 24/7 text or call that number, either dial or text it, and get some professional help. So that again is another great thing to communicate and spread throughout our communities and with all the people we know. Yeah. And our last letter in our acronym is T. And this is the power of Be Smart. Tell everyone you know to be smart, because your voice and all the voices in our community are critical. So please ask yourself, how will you commit to be smart today? And I always challenge people in the audience to please consider at least 3 people in your lives that may not have heard about the message we gave today, may not be aware of the importance of secure storage, the importance of asking about the presence of firearms when their kids go to other homes. Think of 3 people you know that you can share the message with, and take a few minutes, hopefully today, and please communicate that message with them. The more we share within our community, the better we will get our word across, get our message across. And this is our website. And I know that was included, I believe, in the email previous to the Lunch and Learn today, but it's easy to remember, besmartforkids.org. And because of time's sake, we won't open it up right now, but I encourage you to please take a few minutes to explore it at your leisure. And there's tremendous wealth of resources in there, and you are very welcome to share those with anyone and everyone. We encourage you to do that. Okay. On the last few slides, we just have some examples of community outreach that we have done here in Georgia. I spoke earlier about our tabling events, and you can see this was at a YMCA Healthy Kids Day event. And we have activities for the kids and Smarty candies. So we say that's our hook. We have the kids come to the table and get them busy with one of the activities, offer a Smarty candy. And then, of course, we always ask the parents' permission to give them the candy. And that enables us to get a conversation going with the parents. So while one volunteer is working with the children, the other volunteer can speak to the parents, share our information with them. And it's kind of hard to see it, but on the table is our biometric safe, which I have to tell you is the #1 grabber for adults. They are so interested in seeing how those safes open quickly. And I've had several people walk away from the table saying they were going to go home and order it on Amazon. We actually give them the QR code to get it ordered on Amazon. Also available at Walmart. And these are a few more outreaches we have done within the community. These are both from Clark County, so Athens area. The picture on the left shows our Athens volunteers with the sheriff of Athens, and he has spoken with all his officers about the importance of sharing this message with the community, especially when they are called into a situation where a gun is involved. On the right-hand side, it shows some representatives from the Clark County schools who we were very excited to hear last year. They were willing to send our postcards, which they're holding there, home with every student in the system. And Atlanta City Schools passed APS passed a resolution talking about the importance of secure storage. And as we speak, we're in talks with them to hopefully do the same thing, get that message sent home to all 50,000 students in the Atlanta Public Schools. And we're also currently trying to work with DeKalb County Schools, and we hope to branch out and focus on more and more school systems within the state as well. So we always end with our information, and I'm assuming we will probably send a follow-up email out. So we'll include both Fabricia and my emails on there. Please feel free to contact me at any time. And for anyone who might be interested and becoming a part of our Be Smart program. We have several training paths. You can become a local group leader if you have several friends who would like to work with you on spreading the Be Smart message. You can be a presenter, be trained to do what Fabricia and I are doing here today, or you can help with tabling in the community. And most of our volunteers at this point, basically the majority of our volunteers are also Moms Demand Action volunteers. So Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. But as I said earlier, we keep our Be Smart work when we put on our gray shirts and go out and talk about Be Smart, we keep that non-political. But we do want to reach out to all people. So even if you do not want to be connected with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, as a community partner, as a representative of someone in the mental health community, we can train you and we can give you the ability to share within your practices and your communities. So we are at the point now where we can take any questions, and I will go ahead and stop sharing. There we go. Okay, and I'll let Fabricia call on anyone. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat, but since we're a relatively small group, if you want to unmute yourself, I would think that would work too.
I have a question. How would folks get in touch with Be Smart trainers? I guess through you, right, Maggie?
Right. Yes. Yeah, myself or Fabricia. She's been trained, so we're both trainers. Mm-hmm.
But perhaps, but there are trainers throughout the state, or are there trainers throughout the state? If maybe a coalition is in a different area?
Yes, we have people in Savannah area. At present, it's basically Savannah, Metro, Atlanta. So we've got mostly northern suburbs, but northern suburbs, city of Atlanta, and also Athens, Clark County. So those are our 3 areas right now. But we're always glad to spread out, hoping to.
And it's not difficult. When I took the training, I went online in their events and I did a virtual one. Like there are hundreds of people. And then I was trained by Maggie. I went locally in person and then got the training in person as well. So I encourage everyone to search, these events in the Be Smart website. And also see if you find already a local or the closest you have to you to attend in person if possible.
Another thing we can do, I can look it up right in a second here, but we can include the link to the training for this month. Our national group does a virtual once a month training, and I'm not sure if they're still offering it at 2 times during the day, but they generally try to offer a daytime and an evening time. And that gives you a really good idea of the national campaign. And then because we now have the ability to reformat our presentation and make it centered about our state, which is what you just saw, it's good to follow up and have a training done locally with one of our people. So go ahead and take another question if you like, Fabricia, and I'm going to look up right now and see. I saw it.
I'm sending the link for I think it's the national training.
Yeah, I will.
So we are just, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Fabricia.
No, I was just saying, I don't see any questions in the meeting, in the chat. So I don't know if you'd like to.
I was just going to add, it's not really a question, but on the website, I'll put the PDF in the chat, but having the exact language of like what you can text is so helpful, because it's a cringy conversation, kind of like you don't want to be offensive and like start a thing. And I don't know, having those prompts is really helpful, I think.
Right. And we also have some posters. I forgot to talk about our materials. If any of you would care to use these in your practices, we have right behind me here is our placard. And I know my therapist put one of those in her office. She sees children and families as well. And we have those postcards that you saw school people holding. We can give those to you also, so you can share those with families. And we do have some big, now they're big, they're really big posters, but they have that conversation, examples of how to have a conversation with a friend. Again, because it is a touchy subject, especially here in Georgia, and we don't want to offend people if they happen to feel differently than us on some issues. But they do get the point across about how you can use some tips to start a conversation with anyone, because we all want to keep kids safe. That's one thing we all have in common.
So I do see one question in the chat. Do you all offer any conflict resolution tactics on the website, or is that spoken about in the trainings?
Unfortunately, no, because we're not mental health professionals or conflict resolution professionals. We actually used to be honest, dive more into suicide issues, talking about teen suicide, but that was changed. And again, we are not, that's a disclaimer, I need to give. We are not mental health professionals. We are simply sharing access to people, sharing how they can get access from someone like yourselves. But we do have a handout we make available to parents that basically tells, the characteristics, which I know you all know about depressed teens, what to look for. But the thing is, many depressed teens hide their symptoms. I have a friend here whose son took his life a few years ago when he was a sophomore at Etowah High School in Cherokee. And they had absolutely no idea he was a top student. He hid all of his depression and all of his feelings. Fortunately, or I don't know if it's fortunately, but helped them a little that he did take the time to write a note and explain what was going on in his life and not want them to feel responsible. And actually, they had done everything correctly. They had locked all their firearms, but he knew where the key was. So that's, parents really have to think of everything, which is one good thing about biometric safes. A lot of times tell parents, if you have any concern at all, give the key to a friend. Put the key elsewhere. Don't even have it in the house. That way only the owner can access it. And that's probably more information than you wanted.
But
It
it's
takes
like a
only,
sobering.
Okay.
yeah, and it takes only 0 to 1 second to open it. And if you have a code instead of it's 2 seconds. So it's like there's no justification for I need to use it really fast for self-defense. Like it takes 1 second, 2 seconds to access.
I see one more question and then we have to wrap up because we're a little bit over time, but and I guess this could be to the group, have some counties offered free lockbox giveaways in conjunction with gun safety awareness days?
I'm not aware of any, but I do know that some individual groups here and there have done that or have done raffles, but that would be a great initiative for the state to take on. And I heard the sad news this morning. I caught a little bit of political rewind, and the mental health bill did not pass. which is incredibly horrible. So I don't know what funding is going to be like in our state, unfortunately, for things like that.
And I
They-
saw that out. Oh, go ahead.
No, they only offer, I guess, the locks, the cable locks, right? That you can get at the police station, but not the lock box.
Right, and some police departments do have those available. Now, most of the ones I've talked to in Metro Atlanta do not. But like I said, I was fortunate to, another volunteer in another state actually put me onto it to approach the Veterans Administration. And as you may know, they have a very strong campaign going right now. That's their emphasis to reduce the amount of veteran suicides along with PTSD concerns. So they sent me gun locks, which for the moment we have a good supply of, but you know, you can go through those very quickly at tabling events because sadly we come to find out, you know, people may have, I had a grandmother and a mother at a tabling event. They each had loaded guns in their bags. They each took a gun lock, and hopefully when they got home, they, you know, took the ammunition out and locked the gun. And they thanked me for it, but they had a baby in the stroller. And, you know, there are some people, many people, I'm afraid, who just are not aware of the danger and don't consider it until they're told.
Every
Well,
time I
my-
see a string of car break-ins, I just think, okay, how many guns did they get?
Exactly. And, you know, I know in my neighborhood, it goes on the Facebook page, everybody's upset and they're all blaming these people who they claim come in from the inner city. No, and not accepting any responsibility for the fact that they left a loaded gun in a car that was not even locked on their driveway. So that's another thing, fortunately, we need to work on.
I
And
so
I'm so
appreciate the
sorry,
time.
I cannot find, I'm sorry, I will make sure Fabricia has the link to the national training for anyone who's interested in that.
Yes, and we'll share a follow-up email with all these different resources. Maggie and Fabricia, I'm so appreciative of the time that you spent with us today. Maggie, I'm gonna connect you very soon today with Alex. She's interested in some promotional materials, so make sure that she can connect with you right away. But thank you so much, everyone, for spending your lunch with us for this very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.